Good morning, everyone in the chat. Before I start talking and start going up, hi, I see hi from Sam. Hi, Jennifer. Oh my God. All right, guys. Hello. Good morning and welcome to TMF Week. I'll give us a little bit of time so people can pile in and just make sure everyone can hear me fine and everything. You're with me here. I'm Danny Gold. I'm your host here for the morning sessions of TMF Week. So get ready to see me bright-eyed, bushy tail. I'm a lot of energy, so I can't wait to show that off to all of you guys. You might see some ears in the bottom right of my my screen. That's going to be Midas, the TMF cat, who's going to be bothering us probably during the sessions a couple times, during the day. But yeah, I can't wait to get started. I'm very excited for TMF Week. So I'll just let some people pile in real quick before I get started. I'm going to do some housekeeping for everybody. Yes, Jess, TMF cats are the best. Oh, thank you. My last name's Gold, Jessica. I think I'm very funny with his name. So guys, without further ado, I'll get to just some housekeeping real quick. So we have here. So we get this session. I know Oliver and Paul went over it in the last session, but just so you guys know, all the sessions are going to be recorded at the end of the day. Everyone is going to receive a certificate for the entire TMF week, not just for each session. And also to get the recordings at the end of the day, you just come back to this session here, and it should be there. But yeah, so we're going to do a Q&A at the end of the session after Dawn and Sarah are going to be talking. We're just waiting on Sarah. She's coming here. She's just backstage getting ready. And yeah, we're going to have a networking break in the lounge like last time. And yeah, it's going to be a fun session. We're happy to start off TMF week. Very, very excited. So timeline. So we're going to have Dawn and Sarah do their presentation. It's going to be about 30 minutes. Then we're going to have our Q&A session, which is I'm going to be hosting for about 15 minutes. Then I'm going to introduce the next session to you guys. Then we'll have another networking break in the lounge, and we will see you all in the next session. So just to introduce what Dawn and Sarah are going to be talking about today, we have the TMF news today. I already saw a little sneak peek of Dawn's slide deck. It's going to be very, very fun and very, very exciting. And yeah, what's happening in global regulations and standards. And, you know, I've talked enough. I'll let Dawn introduce herself and get everything started.
All right, fantastic. And we will be joined by Sarah here very shortly. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I am Dawn Niccum. I am the Executive Vice President for QA and Compliance at InSeption Group. Also a TMF Reference Model Steering Committee member, and just here to have fun with Montreal and TMF Week. And hopefully that we've tried to make this session somewhat fun, somewhat a little bit cheeky, and I hope everybody will enjoy that. But also hopefully get some really, really good new information out of here. And when we get to the Q&A session, we'll get a lot more serious and can answer all your questions. So it looks like Sarah will be joining us momentarily, and I will let Sarah introduce herself when she gets here. She's having had a little bit of audio difficulty, but oh, here she comes.
There she is.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So I just introduced myself, and you must have just heard me saying, and Sarah will be here momentarily. She's going to introduce herself. Please.
She heard you.
Yeah, I was just going to do. I wanted to do an entrance, Dawn. So I think I managed that. Right? Yeah. And now I don't know who I am because yeah, no, I do. Hello to everybody. I am a director at Hedian. I'm a CDISC member, I'm sure, along with many of you. If you're not, why not? I'm also part of a current initiative with CDISC, who are looking at risk in the TMF. So that's really exciting. We might talk a bit about that later, I think. That's a bit of news, isn't it, Dawn, I think?
Sure. Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah. I'm also a member. Sorry, Dawn?
No, go ahead.
I'm also a member of the HSRAA, which is the Health Records Archive Association, which is kind of more Europe-based, but definitely worth belonging to if you're in the record space, as I'm assuming we all are here. And I don't know, you might see it later. Are the slides being shown? I don't see them.
It will be. It will be. In a
second. Well, I'm going to reveal it anyway. Did you reveal your superpower, Dawn?
I didn't, but we have our welcome slide, so we'll hold that one.
Should we leave that? Okay.
Yeah,
Let's leave that.
let's hold that one.
Okay.
I'll leave you ladies to it. I'll be backstage, and I will see you guys all for the QA session.
All right.
Thanks, Danny.
Okay, good. Okay, so Sarah and I are going to try to be a little cheeky. We'll see how that goes. I don't do cheeky really well. Maybe Sarah does it better than I do, but she's already made her grand entrance. So there you go. What we're going to talk around today is what's happening in global regulations and standards, give you an idea of what's going on there. And we've made this in somewhat a news format. I hope you enjoy it. And I feel like I should have had music, but I wasn't good about that one. So anyway, yeah, I didn't think about it.
Good. Yeah.
I know. We didn't get there. So wait, how do I go to? Now I got to remember how to advance slides. Why is it not going to the next slide? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, there we go. I was clicking and it was not moving, and I was not being happy. Technical difficulties is the way we start out today. So I already did introduce myself. I put as my TMF superpower. I'm really terrible at coming up with these things, but I thought able to determine proper location of a record in a single glance is my superpower, which is kind of a fun one, I think.
That's really cool, and I like that. I like yours is really, really specific. And then I've gone for something really kind of holistic, which is I'm an absolute TMF inspection readiness devotee. It's my passion. So
sorry, I have people walking into the news studio here that I wasn't expecting. So there you go.
They bring some more news, Dawn?
They did. Well, they brought me a chai tea. So we'll so we let them walk in for those kinds of things.
Sure.
All right. So I like TMF inspection readiness devotee. That's great. I'm all about TMF inspection readiness, and I'm even more about inspection steadiness. That is my new term my new one. So enough about us and what we're doing. We're going to break right to some international news of things going around in the TMF world, things that may impact you. All right. So we're going to start out featuring today. We're going to start out talking about some of those things that you may be thinking about. Certainly, we're going to talk a little bit about ICH E6R3. Eudralex and some of the challenges it's bringing. CTIS, also another one in Europe that some people are scratching their heads a little bit about. And we're going to talk about how that might impact the TMF. And then Brexit, nope, not over, still ongoing. UK is still not, it's still has Brexit from Europe, but what's going on? How's that impacting us from a TMF standpoint, what we're going to do? We're going to do a little deep dive into our risk-based approaches, as Sarah alluded to a little bit ago, because we really do want to talk about why is that important and what we're doing. And then some breaking news. I'm going to give you some breaking news on what's going on with the reference model. And also, just wait, I'm going to talk a little bit about the ISF reference model. If you haven't heard about that one, now you're going to hear about it a little bit today. And I know there's a session later on this week. You'll hear much more about it. So I'm going to start out with ICH 6, and then Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you for Eudralex. So let's start with ICH 6. So live updates, what's our latest regulatory news?
I might ask you some questions, Dawn.
Yeah. You might what? Okay. You might ask me
some questions. Yeah.
I don't know. We didn't practice that.
I know. They'll be kind ones.
Wait. Yeah. See, this is what happens. This is like the UK morning talk shows, isn't it? They kind of chat.
Yes.
Yeah. Love it. So did you know that ICH E6, one of the big things was it aligned to update with ICH E8R1. For those of you that I've thrown a bunch of numbers and acronyms out to you. E6, of course, is the GCP guidance from ICH. while E8 is around clinical studies, so general guidelines for clinical studies. And one of the big reasons for the updates of these is so that the E family is what the regulators like to call it. The E family are all aligned. And you'll see that there are some common themes that come through with these. All right, so wait, I get to ask you questions too then.
Yes, you can. You can.
I love it. Okay.
Or comment.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, let's go to R3 and what's happening. This has been out a year now since the draft was released, and we've been talking about it a lot. If you haven't heard about R3, I don't know, maybe you're hiding out, living in a cave there a little bit, but right now, one of the biggest things that is clear in R3 is talking about sponsor investigator oversight. And one of the things around that is not only do they have to do that, but they have to document it. Did you know they had to document it? I mean, my goodness. And when we document it, where are we going to file it? Anyone? Where are we going to file it? Anyone? Yeah. A TMF. The answer was TMF. I thought that was an easy one. Softball out there. Yeah, definitely. Everyone needs to make sure we're filing in that TMF and that we're keeping this up there. So really, yeah. I almost got them, but yeah, there we go. Oh, and they even have a section for me. Look at that. I got it. All right, then. Next piece, so sponsor investigator oversight, really important in there, making sure they file it in their TMF. Investigators, obviously, in their ISF. And I can tell you, putting my auditor hat on, they're really bad about doing that. So everything we can do to encourage our sites to do that. Next one is data governance. Again, GDPR, which we didn't even put in our updates here because GDPR feels a little bit old news, but it's not fully old news because we're still living on how to implement it. Would you say that's true, Sarah, that there are still companies that are not there? And I think the ones that are there are not there, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's still easy to make a mistake.
Yeah, it is. But, this says again that regulators globally are all about our data governance. How do we understand where our data is coming from? How do we understand where it's stored? What are we doing to keep those records safe and all of that sort of thing. So data governance, another big topic in R3 that we have been talking about as an industry for a while, and I think R3 just is codifying it a little bit for us. They actually added computer system validation into R3. So, R2 or the original E6 just sort of talked, you should have validated systems, but they're actually giving you some guidance on what the expectations are, which I think is pretty cool. And, even risk-based approaches in computer system validation. So again, risk-based approach, risk is all over this guidance, which we didn't even really mention fully here. And then essential records. So are we calling them documents anymore? Oh, no. Why do you think they changed to records, Sarah?
I think because when we think of documents, or we think of paper, and then we think, maybe now we think more electronic, but I don't think we think of it's not just about that, the TMF, especially for some sponsors with certain types of trials. It's not just about those two, what I would call the mainstream records, but I think they want us to think more holistically. What do you think, Dawn?
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of it's about things being electronic, but I also think it's truly about thinking of a record versus just that paper document. So, a record is much more than just what's in the PDF or whatever you might put in your system, or, other files that are not even records that are not even PDF, those XML files from submissions. those the databases and information coming out of your EDC and out of your SAS programming and so forth. Those aren't really even files. They're documents as you think about it. They're not documents, they're files, they're records, and they have metadata. So there's other information behind the actual record itself, and that's I think what drives a lot of it. And I agree, it's thinking more holistically. So if you haven't been thinking holistically, haven't been thinking about TMF repositories, you'll be thinking about it now. And then just the essentiality of what are those records that are the minimum, which again I always really guide people on ICHE 6 when they say that's all I have to have in my TMF. What's in there? And I said, well, if that's all you have in your TMF, you're going to be in a lot of trouble in an inspection. So they're trying to give you the bare minimum, trying to give you a start. And we're waiting to see. One of the things as a reference model we suggested is they take those tables out because we thought it was pretty confusing to have essential versus maybe essential records. I've heard, the latest I've heard, I don't know if the tables are coming out, but I've heard they've combined those to try to make that less confusing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think once we see the final, we'll see some there. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about essentiality?
Well, I like the fact that the tables that were there before are no longer there because they were very confusing. But I think they've added some clarity. But I think what they're really trying to get us to do is to make our own decision about what's really required so that we don't miss anything. Because I think it's quite obvious what you need in your TMF, depending on your trial. Whereas by having that, section 8 in R2, it's very, people can make the mistake of thinking that's what they need. But actually, they need to kind of engage brain and think, well, what have I prepared? What have I created? What records have I created that show what I did in my study? So I think that's a step in the right direction, but I still love the TMF reference model.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely a fan of the TMF reference model, if you can't tell.
Yeah. Well, we must be CDISC members, I think, Dawn.
I might even know someone on the steering committee. All righty. Might have a friend or two on that. All right, so let's move off of E6 and talk about Eudralex. This is all you, Sarah.
Yeah, so we've gone from kind of global, I guess. Now we're going to do a little bit of Europe and have a little look at just some things. I mean, we could have talked about the EU clinical trial regulation, but it has been around for a long time. Even before it was actually instigated and used, everyone was waiting to kind of use it. But I just wanted to talk about Eudralex Volume 10 because I think it doesn't really get talked about quite a lot. And so I just wanted to raise it up to everybody here. And there's some particular chapters which I just, want people to kind of make a note of. Chapter 1, we're going to talk about that a little bit more, I think, just in a minute. But this is the clinical trial information system, and it's where the applications are made for clinical trial applications. And it's also kind of replacing the EU clinical trials documentation as well. And there's a lot of templates there which you can use, which help with the application. But there are some issues that have arisen. I just wanted to talk about specifically, in that there is documentation that you need to upload, which I mean, you can imagine, the TMF documentation, which has maybe private data, confidential data, even maybe sensitive data too. And this has caused quite a discussion. And in fact, I was at Long Dawn, you were there too, at the EU CDISC TMF interchange in Berlin earlier this year. And there was a presentation which mentioned, well, talking about CTIS, it mentioned the difficulties. And I don't know if I'm going to answer this. I'm going to pose a question or a query or a conundrum, should we call it. So what companies do is that they redact this sensitive information and then submit that to CTIS. All of that information is, anyone can go and look. If you've got an account, you can go and have a look. So that's why there's an issue with this sensitive information. And the question arose, and I don't think we answered it in Berlin either, you know, do you, as these documents, they're documents that are in the TMF, but they're different to the documents in the TMF because they've been redacted. Should they be filed as well? So this was a big question. I know what I think. So I'd be interested to know.
I'd love to hear in the chat if anyone wants to add what they would think. It's always, you know, it's always a challenge when you have a record that's changed but not changed. So you know it's the same record, but now it's a redacted record that's part of a submission. And this actually happens even with regulatory submissions too. You know, those packages where you have things in your regulatory submission package that is slightly different, like a red line document, for example. You know, do you want, you know, generally we say we don't put drafts in the TMF, but it's part of the submission. So should it be there as well? And, you know, and also I do see, could it be filed in an authoritative source? Sure, it could be. You know, could we, you know, do we say CTIS and some of the things that are in there is part of a TMF repository in a way? I don't know. You know, I think we are still looking, you know, how to do this. And I know people are still definitely filing it. I don't think it's wrong to file it, but I also want to argue a little bit it's duplicative. And then I really, well, we're going to talk more about CTIS in the next slide a little bit, but just some dates and, you know, the pieces of it. Some of the redacting, I thought, as I looked at it, some companies were talking about the things they want submitted in there. They're almost going to have a document that's all black because everything in it is proprietary, right? You know, what are you going to put in that? So it does make it very different. So I think the whole CTIS, how to file it and what to file is challenging. It can be filed as part of the regulatory submissions, but it is a little bit different than a regulatory submission. So, you know, I can tell you the reference model, we are asking this question as well. Where should we file this? And, you know, do we need an artifact around CTIS with some guidance around that of what, you know, what we would recommend best practices for what you file.
Yeah. Well, I was just kind of glancing through all the messages coming in, and I mean, this is not a scientific approach, but I would say from what I've seen, it looks like most people are filing it as part of the submission package. So I'm assuming what they're doing by that they're filing the documents in their kind of required location, but then filing the package. So that seems to be the generally what's happening with people on this.
Yeah, and I do see that some people are considering it not duplicative because it's a redacted version of the record, so it shows what they redacted. So interesting. And the requirements for publications are changing June 18th, so you'll have to redact less. I think the redact less is what I'm hearing from companies, though, is their concerns about you know, making sure proprietary things are correct. Yeah. All right. So what about chapter 4? This is interesting. Conduct of actions. I
think it's interesting. And it's worth a quick read because it's actually not that long. And it's actually about how the inspectors have to keep records and where they have to keep them. I mean, I'm absolutely delighted that they've got an index. They don't call it that, but they've got, you know, in the appendix, they've got an index they need to use. And it tells them they have to set up local and general files as soon as they're appointed to a particular inspection. So I quite like the fact, you know, that's pretty similar to what we have to do. So I just thought people would like to know
they have to follow rules too. What about that? Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it made me smile.
Yeah.
And then chapter 4, I mean, I'm hoping everybody knows about this, but I suspect they don't understand where this document, this guidance document on the content management and archiving of clinical trial master files, where it sits. It's part of Eudralex Volume 10, and Eudralex Volume 10 is a set of guidelines for the EU CTR. There is actually a set of guidelines also for the previous EU regulation as well. But I think the majority of us now are kind of probably majorly working on EU CTR. So, and you know, there's I tend to see this guideline on content management archiving as the kind of first time you really saw them taking note of the fact it could be an electronic TMF. Although there are pains to say it covers, and it does, paper and electronic. So I think this one's around December 2018, and it talks about it does cover the structure and the content a little bit, not in much detail, but it talks about control of the TMF. Of course, you can have that paper and you can have that electronic. It talks about scanning and transfer to other media. And it talks about archiving and retention, but it's very much, you can get the feel of electronic rather than paper behind it. So,
yeah, I really like this guideline. This is one that I don't print a lot of things, but I have a printed copy of this one handy to go and refer to from time to time, just to remind me on some ways to state things. But really, it really does give really good guidance on how to do this. And it really is a guideline. So I think that's the other thing for people to remember. It's not guidance, it's really a guideline, which doesn't mean you have to follow it word for word, but you're going to want to be as close to this as possible, because otherwise they can cite you against it. So just keep that in mind, because it is part of it. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you for that overview of Eudralex. I thought that was fantastic. Yeah, that's great. So we started with CTIS. Just to go back, give a little bit about the guidelines, and someone already alluded to the last date, so had a little preview there. But this was launched back in 2022, the end of 2022. I know that as companies were trying to start doing their uploads and that, there have been quite a few technical glitches around this. So, I think there's been a little bit of pain over the last couple of years. I'm hearing that it's getting better. Let's hope so, because by the end of this year, everything's got to be there. So, so I think they're working their best to make it, but like any electronic system, for all of us who have implemented one in our lifetime, there tends to be a little glitches around there, but it sounds like, it's definitely getting there. Thank you, Eileen, for putting that down. The records are a combination of records that already exist in the TMF. We already talked about this quite a bit, that these are not most likely brand new, other than the submission, proof of submission itself. Most of these records are probably in your TMF already. And there are revised transparency rules coming June 18th. So they are trying to make the redaction not so difficult, so that they can make sure that nobody is seeing your commercial proprietary information that shouldn't see it, but that it's still a challenge. I think CTIS is still a challenge, and certainly it feels much more out there than even the US, clinicaltrials.gov, that does have some things out there. When that first all came out, when people were posting results, people were a little hesitant on that. I think we're getting used to it in the US on the FDA side a little bit better, but this took it to a new level, I think.
Yeah.
And and I think it's interesting too. The regulators can pop in there. So one of the things the Torsten from Bee Farm said in Berlin that we just heard, he talked about, the inspectors, they all have CTIS access. So all of these records that are in there, are available for your inspectors before they're even asking for access to your TMF. And they're going to be looking to make sure things match up. So again, not necessarily whether you have, I don't think it's that you have a redacted piece, but if you put a protocol version in there or you put other information in there, it should match up with what's in the TMF as well, because that should be your regular records, which I think that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, I'm going to keep us moving here because we have a little bit more, and then we want to give plenty of time for questions too. What about Brexit? It feels like Brexit was forever ago, but there is still a lot going. Probably not in the UK. It probably still feels like you're going through the growing pains of it, teething pains of it. But what about for TMF? What are those challenges?
Well, you know what? I think for the TMF, it's a little bit business as usual, because the real guiding kind of Bible is ICH-GCP. So that doesn't change. We still recognize that, and we still deal with that. And so, like for everybody else, when we move to R3, that there's potentially some changes to go on there. But one of the things that people don't really think about is, well, okay, so when you were in Europe, when the UK was in Europe, EU CTR, that's what we were dealing with. CTIS, that's what we're dealing with. Although CTIS didn't exist then, that's coming kind of as we've left. So more or less, well, it's been around, but not usable. But so we have to go for our clinical trial regulations. We go back to, in a way, kind of 2004. But what we did is we did this with a lot of laws actually. We reviewed the law to basically take out anything that said Europe. But pretty much the law kind of stayed as it was, really. So there was a statutory instrument back in 2004, number 103, and that just got updated to a 2019 version, number 77, apparently. And as I say, it really just kind of took out any references to Europe. So not really a big change, but more that people didn't really know what was going on and how it was going to affect them. And now I think people are more comfortable with what it is we need to do with the TMF. It hasn't really sort of changed. The only thing that is different is when you look at archiving, because there is a different statutory instrument that looks at that, and that's 1928 from 2006. And that archiving for that is 5 years after the end of the trial. So that's out of kilter. We know ICH-GCP, the EU CTR, it's out of kilter with everybody, the FDA. It was the thinking maybe back then, right?
So current GCP said 2 years after last marketing application, which could have been any time, right? Absolutely. And then the other thing is, the piece around, but it's very different than Europe. That's 25 years. So 5 years, when I was looking at archiving requirements and, what it was for different regulatory agencies, and I saw 5 years, like, wait a minute, where did that come from? Big difference, big difference. The reality is you're probably a bit longer because you're not, unless you're only doing it in the UK, right?
Yeah, and I believe the wording is at least, so it allows you to keep it for longer if required. So and there'd be I suspect very few clinical trials that are run in just one country, but I mean it does happen. Right. So that's quite interesting. And then of course with the clinical trial applications, it means that if you want to run your trial in the UK, you've got to actually apply using the UK system, we actually we had to revoke ourselves, if you like, from the European Medicines Regulatory Network and the ability to get into CTIS. But there is an electronic submissions approach that can be used. Initially, you had to do a different submission for regs and ethics, but that has now been brought together because that would probably be a major kind of, I think, sort of gets in the way of people thinking this is easy to do. So that's CT applications. Trial logistics, I'm afraid it does cause some kind of extra issues. If you're going to sort of manufacture in the UK, then you've got to get special licenses to be able to move them out into Europe, and vice versa if you're bringing in drugs from outside of the UK. So I think that probably has caused some, people just have to think in a different way and use the logistic companies that have moved their processes in the right way. And I think that was everything I wanted to talk about.
Fantastic. Yeah. All right. Well, I had to throw, I love this Ferris Bueller's Day Off quote. I hope everybody gets a little, but it's true. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you're going to miss it. And that's true. There's lots of things going on. So on that note, what else is going on in the risk-based approaches? So we had lots more material than we thought we did, Sarah. So we're probably going to zip through this, and actually all the announcements for TMF for CDISC, I will leave we'll probably go on that, but let's keep moving here. So we did want to talk about risk-based approaches a little bit, and I'll get us started, and then you are the risk-based approaches queen, being on the initiative. But I think ICH E6R3, again, it does talk about risk all over the place. We're also seeing some things in the computer system validation, that there's EU guidance that came out in 2023 that does talk about risk-based approach in validating of computer systems, as well as FDA has a new guidance that came out more than a year ago. Hopefully it'll get finalized soon, called computer software assurance. So really getting away from even that validation term, which I think is interesting, and really speaking to a lot of us are utilizing systems like, this one called Montreum. I heard it was pretty good. And, companies like Montreum do a lot of validation, have to. Their own validation. Why aren't we using what they have? And then, trying to leverage that as much as we can. So, definitely guidance is out there. And then I hear there's this white paper coming out.
I've heard that too. Yes. Now I am sitting on the working groups that are looking at bringing a white paper together to look at TMF and risk-based approaches, because I think we all want to do it, but we all don't really know how to and how to apply. I mean, QC, I think a lot of people have dabbled with that and are doing that, and maybe comfortable with that, but anything else seems like, well, how do you do that? So I'm in, there's 3 working groups to part of it. One is the white paper, one is tools, so we're going to try and provide some tools for people to use, and one is also training, because CDISC are very good at putting training on, and so it's very interesting. Makes you really think it through as a participant, and it's I think by the end of the year, hopefully we'll be done with it. I think the only complication is because we've approached it without E6R3, because you just don't know what that's going to end up looking like, right? So if that then gets finalized, maybe things will change. I don't know, but that's our approach at the moment.
Yep. Well, that's going to change all our training in the TMF reference model. I can tell you that. We're already doing that. But yeah, great. So just a little taste of risk-based approaches that you have there. So just some quick, I'm going to go quickly through, you know, what's going on in the reference model. You know, some of the latest breaking news. So the risk initiative, where we talked about this one, yeah, due for release at 2024. The training won't be out until 2025, most likely. I can tell you that because I had the training group. So I know that's when we can slot that in. But, you know, a lot of these other tools and everything else will be out soon. So be on the lookout for that. Investigator site file reference model. So I just want to spend a couple seconds on this. And that's more, you know, listen, we know that you go to investigator sites and their files can be filed in all kinds of different ways. They may not, you know, be complete. They don't know what they should file. They don't know what they should put in there, and they don't necessarily know how to file it. And there's models out there, but they just haven't really been standardized. So we're really trying to bring this in, talk to everybody, and be able to do it. I am one of the steering committee liaisons. The leads are Aaron Knight and Matt Lowry, both from sites. And there's 5 subgroups on that as well. So that kicked off in April, and we're just starting to dive into some of the evaluations and outreach, and you're going to hear more about that later this week. You know, stay tuned. We're taking TMF into the future. So TMF reference model version 4, we've started having the discussions about version 4 and how that is going to change, you know, how we manage. One of the biggest things is around digital data flow and how, you know, how we're taking things directly from the protocol, not only into the CRF, but into the TMF. You know, so having that digital protocol and digital data flow throughout. So you've probably heard bits about that. I'll bet you'll hear more about that this week. Standardizing metadata, and also what do we do with those sub-artifacts? Really thinking about, can we standardize? Can we start having this? So if you look TMF to TMF, it's going to help with your interoperability, you know, your migrations, your archival, and all that good. So stay tuned. Just starting to talk about it. And then just some upcoming events, you know, just so we know. CDISC Interchange, 23rd, 24th of October. I think there might be a ticket being given away through this event. Certainly do that. There are the Fundamentals of TMF Reference Model course, a full-day course on the reference model, taught by some very lovely people called Dawn and Lisa. And I might know one of them. I might, you know, she might live with me. I don't know. We also just got the introduction to the TMF reference model out in June out in Japanese last week. So for any of your Japanese colleagues, they can watch that. That's available and that's free. And we're doing one for biometric professionals. So we're going to get those data managers and statisticians involved. All right. I know we're at the end of the session. I want to thank everyone. And I don't know if do we have any questions, Danny? I don't know if I left any time for questions.
But yeah, no, we didn't get any questions, I think, coming in. Dawn, Sarah, thank you so much. And guys, what a great start to TMF week. I can't wait to see the rest of it.